Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. We are here to really look at and celebrate that January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And this is the first of 4 human trafficking awareness presentations being offered by Junior League of San Diego over the course of the month. My name is Ashley Frez. I am the Human Trafficking Task Force Chair for Junior League of San Diego. And I do want to share that this opportunity is free and has been offered to not only Junior League members, but also the public as well. Before we get into the incredible content of the evening, I do want to go over some kind of basic Zoom housekeeping items. If you are not speaking or presenting, please be sure that you are on mute and that your camera is off. This will help, of course, with background noise and any bandwidth issues that we may experience. Over the course of the evening, if you have any questions, comments, concerns that you would like to bring to the attention of any of the panelists that are speaking, please put those in the Q&A section of Zoom. One of our Human Trafficking Task Force members, Jess, is going to be monitoring that over the course of this evening's event. And all of those will be addressed at the end of each panelist's presentation. We are also going to be recording this presentation as well. We do want to offer the opportunity of others to view the great information that will be shared and continue spreading awareness of human trafficking beyond this event itself. I'd also like to share kind of a very brief overview of Junior League of San Diego and who Junior League is and the work that's being done. Junior League has been in San Diego since 1929. It's an organization of women who are working diligently to address really pressing issues in communities across the country, across the world, and of course in San Diego. And this is done in a variety of ways by volunteering, developing leadership skills among women, and improving community through effective action and leadership. And of course, one of those critical agents in being able to do that well is being able to embrace and cultivate relationships with community partners who are doing the work every single day. The Human Trafficking Task Force itself is a new component to the Junior League of San Diego, but human trafficking awareness is not new to Junior League nationally or to San Diego. The Junior League has a policy agenda, and on that policy agenda, there are various topics, one of which being human trafficking. And we have members who actively are serving through effective legislation, advocacy efforts, developing and supporting law and policy that are focused on human trafficking. Last year was the 7th year that Junior League hosted a human trafficking rally at Balboa Park and brought together community partners, Junior League members to spread awareness. This year, of course, with COVID, that has created an opportunity to be a little bit more creative. We are not able to host the rally this year, but we are looking at different ways to be able to continue human trafficking awareness in our community. The Human Trafficking Task Force is focused on learning from community partners who are engaged in human trafficking awareness every day, who are supporting survivors along their journey every day, and learning what their needs and their gaps are, and figuring out how Junior League can be a part of the work that is already being done. So with that, I will stop talking. I want to thank everyone for being part of the Junior League mission, for helping us to be voices of action, justice, and change. And with that, I will turn it over to Bridget Adams, who is a Human Trafficking Task Force member as well. And she will introduce our first guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for that beautiful introduction to share with all of our guests tonight a little bit about what we're doing at the League. It is my honor and my privilege to introduce our guest speakers this evening. Thank you, ladies, for being here. Kim Berry-Jones is the director of the Center for Justice and Reconciliation of Point Loma Nazarene University. And Jessica Kim is the program director of Educational Pathways for the Center for Justice and Reconciliation at Point Loma Nazarene University. Thank you, ladies. Welcome.
Thank you, Bridget. It's great to be with you tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm going to try to get my screen doing the right thing right now and hope for the best here. Okay, great. So again, thanks so much for having us. Thrilled to be here with you tonight. And Jessica Kim, my colleague, and I are going to be doing what we call our HT Human Trafficking 101, and then also going to have the opportunity to share a little bit more with you about the work that we're doing at the center. And we really appreciate the opportunity to do that. So let's just jump in. When we do this talk often, and we talk about how it's like a fire hose. So get ready, because we really do have a lot of information that we're doing pretty quickly. But I know that they mentioned they'll be recording this, so if it's something you wanted to go back and listen to again, you could. But let's start with defining human trafficking and what it is. So, because many of us maybe don't know what it is, or don't know that it's happening here in San Diego. I know that 10 years ago, I did not have an awareness of it here right in our community. But it is unfortunately alive and well, and a big part of the underground economy in San Diego, and a huge issue exploiting our fellow citizens. So human trafficking is the exploitation of another person for the purposes of either sex or labor. And there are elements that have to be in place for something to be considered human trafficking under the law, and those are force, fraud, or coercion. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that actually means, because it's not what the media has portrayed to us that it means. There are a lot of ways that we see force, fraud, and coercion that you might not expect, and really are much more common than the media portrayal that we see of trafficking. In addition, it is considered human trafficking when there's a commercial sex act happening with a minor. So if somebody is under the age of 18, force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be in play for that person to be considered a victim of trafficking. You'll hear the acronym CSEC, which is the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children. And that is a way we define a minor who is being trafficked. But that is a law that happened in California that we like to remind people there is no such thing as a child prostitute. They do not have the legal consent, and therefore they are considered being trafficked if there's any commercial sex going on. There are 3 types of trafficking. We're going to focus more heavily on sex trafficking this evening, but there is also rampant labor trafficking going on in San Diego County, and organ trafficking is also an issue that, although gets a lot more attention around the world, is something that all of us need to be aware of also. This really quickly is a heat map from Polaris. Polaris is a national organization that tracks human trafficking trends. And you'll see by this, this is based on the calls that come into the Polaris human trafficking hotline. And you can see that this isn't that surprising, and that the red areas are the areas of where the most calls are coming through. And you see that San Diego is unfortunately right on that map. This is common to urban areas, more common to urban areas because there are more people, although we see trafficking happening all across the nation. San Diego, though, has been identified as a hotspot, which is what galvanized our community quite a few years ago now to start doing something about it. And Jess and I are just going to kind of flow back and forth while we talk.
Ping pong back and forth.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that although we live in this beautiful city of San Diego, it's also a city where CSEC and trafficking is happening, and it's happening a lot. It's happening rampant. So we want to understand, we saw the map of the national, of how it's happening nationally, but we also want to understand what is happening here locally in San Diego County. And why is it happening here? And so from a 2016 study with Dr. Jamie Gates and Amy Carpenter, some of the statistics and information that I'm going to be sharing with you comes from that research project. So we do know that we have proximity to the border, right across, we're right up against the border, and we call this region, it's both San Diego, Tijuana border region. And so being part of a border town, that is one of the reasons that, trafficking is happening here. We also have a large tourism that creates demand for commercial sexual exploitation. We have, big events that come in, sporting events. We have Comic-Con that also are held here annually. So whenever you have a large population, male population that comes into a town, then that's usually when the higher rates of sexual exploitation happens. From this study, there was also discovered there's over 100 identified gangs here in San Diego County. So gangs practice, a lot of sexual exploitation happens along with drugs and arms trafficking as well. This is a transportation hub where there's a lot of transient transportation coming through. And we also have a large agriculture and military town. So again, when there's large population of tourism, military, and tourism, then that makes the city, have higher demand for sexual exploitation. Can you go to the next slide, please?
It's not cooperating with me. I'm so sorry. Let's see.
Okay.
Oop. Did I lose the screen share?
You went back to the first slide.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
I think I've got it now. Okay. Are you, just so I can clarify, you're just seeing the first slide, this is the correct slide right now and not my whole screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
But can you do it into a full screen?
Is it, okay. It looks like it is for me. So let's see. Is it showing you the slides on the side?
Yes.
Okay. I do not know why it's doing that.
Oh, it almost went, kind of clicked in and out again. Can you hit that again? Maybe it's a glitch.
So sorry.
Oh, there it is. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
So here are the stats from the 2016 study I was just talking about. And in this study, it was estimated that there are upwards of 8,000 victims at any given time. These are child sexual exploitation and human trafficking victims here in San Diego County. The average age of a person the average age of entry is 16 years old. So this is happening to our youth. This is happening at a very young age. This is the age that was, reported. So you can probably imagine that the exploitation or grooming process started even before the age of 16. 80% of the victims are from the US. So although we are in a border town, it is not foreign nationals that are being trafficked. It is people here in San Diego and United States. The underground economy is an $810 million a year underground economy. So it's very lucrative. It's making a lot of money. So the facilitators or traffickers are making upwards of $670,000 per year. So you can see how the demand is increasing. It's also very lucrative. So it's an issue and a problem that is impacting many, many people. Can you go to the next screen, Kim? So this next video that we're going to show you, it's okay. This video, we're going to show you a quick video. It's a few minutes long. This is from did it debut this year or last year? It debuted last year. It was Monica Dean and NBC. They did a documentary where they interviewed many organizations. They went and explored what trafficking looked like in San Diego. So we'll go ahead and play this for you, and then we'll come back right after.
Okay, are you seeing my screen? I'm so sorry, we're having a little bit of.
So yeah, this is the sex trafficking in San Diego.
Okay, I'm having trouble figuring out what you're seeing versus what I'm seeing because I have the video up now. So
Okay.
let me, I have an idea.
Okay.
So sorry. Welcome to my nightmare right now, trying to do this smoothly. Okay, I'm going to, here we go, I got it. Okay.
It's still, yeah.
This is a free
on my
call from
screen. Yeah.
It's not,
again.
sorry. It's not showing?
I'm still seeing the sex trafficking in San Diego slide.
Okay.
Should I?
Okay. Let me try it this way.
Okay.
Is that correct?
It's it says Kim Jones has started screen sharing, so nothing has popped up yet.
So
Central Jail. This call is being recorded.
okay, I'm so sorry. I don't know what.
Maybe I can go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, if you can try. I apologize. I'm not sure why this isn't working. We've done it so many times, but I'm having trouble jumping between the video and. Great. Thank you, Jess, for saving the day.
No worries.
Hello, this is a free call from
John.
an inmate at
San Diego Central Jail.
This call is being recorded. You may start the conversation now.
Hello? Hello? I don't love nobody but you. I just really want to get out of jail like now. Now. Can you do me a favor?
What?
Can you bail me out? Because I don't want to be here.
I know, I'm trying.
James Gary, well, when I met him, was 19 years old. He ended up making some calls from jail, which are all recorded. All jail calls are recorded. And he was calling several young women that he knew, girlfriends of his. He was 19 years old, and these girls were 15 and 16. James was trying to convince these young women to get money together for him to be able to post bail.
I'm about to make a basket. How do you do that?
You go on, Craigslist, the back page, and you take some cute little pictures. Hey, you deleted all those young pictures though? Like, ones that make you look
JMJ.
Okay. Alright, baby.
I'll send the pictures on Facebook.
Come on, baby. It's Starbucks handling business. You feel me? I'm sending you somewhere where the well ain't dry, man. So you know, just be good with that mouthpiece. And don't put my motherfucking lips on nobody.
Why would I do that?
Unless it's alright, if that's what you gotta get me out.
Has there ever been a time where you made a decision in a relationship that, you didn't think you would ever do, but you did it because you cared about that person or you loved that person?
Love you.
I love you too.
Or you made a decision out of a space of fear.
When I get back, we're gonna have some dates. If not, I'm taking the phone.
You chose to make this decision because you were worried about what might happen to you or what might happen to other people, but you compromised your values in some way, shape, or form because you were motivated by the fear of your own personal safety or others.
I had to slap her.
I call it psychological kidnap.
There is no one thing that isolates you or insulates you from experiencing trafficking. Anyone can experience human trafficking.
For more than a year, we've been investigating the complicated issue of the sex trafficking of children in San Diego. We've reviewed hundreds of records, talked with survivors.
My exploitation started at 12.
17. Yeah, she was 17 years old. I'm not gonna quit. I'm not giving up on my daughter.
We've heard from traffickers.
I heard that you make an email and then you go on, Craigslist, the back page, and you take some cute little pictures.
We're taking you into a dark underworld that operates in broad daylight.
Here was a 74-year-old man who was having sex with minors, who had success in the corporate America. He got a get out of jail free card.
There is no such thing as child prostitution. What you are buying is child rape.
It is a battle and a half, but there is hope.
And showing you how we all can be part of the solution. This is Stolen.
In a sex trafficking investigation into
sex trafficking, face of human trafficking.
You've seen it in the news.
Oh my God, they got Amanda!
In movies.
they're going to take you.
But what's happening here, what we're talking about, doesn't look like this.
Think about your daughter or your sister or somebody or your brother. This is happening to both girls and boys. You don't have to be physically held. You don't have to be physically constrained. It is all a mental manipulation. It's a mental brainwashing that takes place. This is one of the most horrific injustice we have in our communities right now. My exploitation started at 12, so it started really, really young. The grooming process where the trafficker begins to gain the trust of the victim started before that, so it took about 4 or 5 years. It's not the stranger danger kind of situation. It's usually somebody that is close to the youth and that has direct access to them.
Why don't we start telling our kids the truth about that 80% of the harms that are going to come to them are not going to be from a stranger who pulls them off on the streets. It's going to be from someone trying to befriend them, or someone who is posing as a friend, or a family, or a coach, or a teacher that comes in and tries to exploit them.
Why do you think we have such a problem here?
It is unfortunately a very easy crime to perpetrate. It involves human deception, human exploitation, and it can take on any form. Drugs are the first criminal industry everywhere in the world and right here in San Diego. Second is the selling and buying of human beings for purpose of profit. That's human trafficking.
When they hear human trafficking, they think of, someone coming over in a shipping container in the middle of the night, or a young girl kidnapped off of the streets. Here in San Diego, it's our neighbors trafficking our neighbors. It's our middle schoolers trafficking our middle schoolers.
It's not out there away from us across the border. It's our own girls and our own boys from our own neighborhoods.
We do have the border to our south, and that's not where we see a large majority of our victims coming from. The large majority are citizens. They live here in San Diego. They're the ones that are being bought, they're the ones being sold, they're the ones being recruited.
People don't have an awareness of what the issue looks like because it kind of hides in plain sight.
Human trafficking is the commercial exploitation or selling of a person for sex or labor, and often by force, fraud, or coercion. By California law, anyone under 18 who has sex for money is considered a victim of sex trafficking.
There is no such thing as child prostitution. What you are buying is child rape.
The target rich victim is a teenager. And that's why the average age in San Diego County when somebody is first lured into sex trafficking is 16.
How old was she when she met this man?
17. Yeah, she was 17 years old. The guy was like 9 years older than her. She is the type of person that would just, always just care about others, and, to the point where it's almost like hurts herself.
This single dad never thought he'd be part of this story. He asked us to disguise his identity because he fears for his family's safety. He says the trouble started at his daughter's first job in high school.
She got a job at a local hamburger joint. What I didn't know is that when she was working there was going to be a predator there who was actually out there to boyfriend these young women, and unfortunately my daughter got caught up in that. It's not something that happens where it's some dramatic, I'm gonna just snatch the kid and take him away kind of a thing. No, it happens slowly over time. I would say a year and a half had gone by, because at this point she ended up leaving the house. Well, my ex-wife basically said, hey, I found pictures of, your daughter on, this sex site. And she was telling, she told me basically what she discovered. I was just closed off, just thinking on how I could rescue my daughter.
Now, 2 years later, his daughter is an adult, and she's still in a relationship with her alleged trafficker.
You are basically in a riptide. I'm over here, I see you in a riptide. The only thing that I'm thinking is, how am I getting my daughter out of this riptide? Am I gonna get a jet ski, a boat? Am I gonna just paddle out my surfboard and get you? I don't know. And you're just you don't know what to do. You're stuck, you're scared, you don't know what to do. She's getting taken out to the ocean.
I call it psychological kidnap. That is what they use. That's the simplest way to think about it. They're not kidnapping the person, the body. They're kidnapping their mind, so the person believes that they're going along voluntarily when they're really not. They never had a chance.
Psychological kidnap. Held hostage in your own mind, trapped but unaware you've been tricked.
Our brain isn't fully formed or developed until we're 25 years old. So let's say a 30-year-old perpetrator who is manipulating a 16-year-old, it's a completely unfair playing field because she doesn't even have the same cognitive structures that he has. She doesn't have the ability to read and understand the situation appropriately because her brain is not functioning properly yet.
So it begins with love and attention and saying, oh, you deserve so much more. I'm always here for you. And after the trust is built, then things shift.
One of the favorite lines is, just this one time. But once that first time happens, they've been transformed. They feel lesser. They feel cheap. They feel like a product to be sold.
This is like a cult. It's kind of the same mindset where they are brainwashing you to think that there's no way out. I did not feel I could get out. He had told me that there was people that didn't care about me. There was nobody that I could trust. I didn't know there was a way out.
We often refer to it as trauma bonding. Some people refer to it as Stockholm Syndrome, which is kind of the old version of that idea.
It's the trauma bonding that takes place between the victim and the perpetrator, where there is this love and at the same time hate. And you are confused. You don't want this pain to continue. And yet this person is telling you that they love you.
It's a stolen identity. It's a stolen agency.
Okay, let me go back to the presentation. When I was a part of the documentary, I was a little bit concerned that that Monica was not going to honor our stories as survivors of trafficking, but she did such a wonderful job of honoring the stories and understanding the mindsets of survivors. And so I was very honored to have been a part of this documentary. So if you get a chance, go back and look at them. There are several, I think there's 7 of them, 7 episodes. So each one talks about different parts of sex trafficking, because it's such a complicated subject that that you would need to go back and kind of watch each one to fully understand what we're talking about. And when it comes to survivors and trafficking specifically, you're going to, depending on the experience of the survivor, you're going to have different stories and different parts, right? Because each of our experiences is so different that we come from different lens and different understandings. So just know that from us sharing this presentation, there's so much more to learn. But one of the things that was mentioned in this documentary is the vulnerabilities of the victims, right? This is a manipulation that happens. This is the love bombing that happens. This is not the stranger danger, but it's someone that understands the vulnerabilities and manipulates that situation. So here's a list of just a list of what we came up with. So prior sexual abuse, for example, right? If someone has experienced prior sexual abuse, then this person might feel like this is normal. This is something that has happened to me. This feels familiar. So that might be a way of grooming someone. There's the foster care system. There's large population of kids from the foster care system that are vulnerable because of their situations or because they don't have the support, that are being manipulated into trafficking. Runaway youth, we know that if you don't have the basic needs, the housing, the shelter, you can be out in the streets and within a very short time be approached and say, you know what, you don't have anywhere to sleep tonight, come with me, I can give you a safe place to be. If you come from an impoverished situation and you're having to figure out ways to survive, this will be a vulnerability. Low education, the lack of self-esteem, refugees or immigrant population that come to the United States and don't quite understand the laws and procedures here are vulnerable to this situation as well. And we have widows, abandoned wives, and children's. And so where are the victims? Where are they being exploited? Well, we know the pornography, the porno industry is a big place for people to be trafficked. We've seen, recently places like Pornhub that have been cited, and survivors of trafficking have worked endlessly to bring awareness that a lot of these pornographies and porn sites are exploiting children, not checking their ages and exploiting children. Massage parlors, this is something that we have been working as hard as well here in San Diego County. escort services and schools. Like I mentioned before, the average age of a person that is trafficked is 16 years old. So we have children recruiting other children in the schools. And the internet, obviously, this is a place where people are being exploited. It's very easy for someone to befriend a child, even in their bedrooms, right? Just being on the internet, they're being exposed to different people and situations, and the street prostitution as well. Is this me? Okay. So where the victims being recruited? So this is a list of places that we've come up with. I always ask when I'm doing a presentation in person, like, does anything from this list stands out to you? We know the internet, the schools, trolley stations, and we also have churches up here because we know this is not a stranger coming in and kidnapping the person and taking them. So this is a befriending, this is loving, this is building a relationship with someone. So even in churches, it's happening. Kim, do you want to go?
Okay, so we are going to actually have to wrap this up a lot more quickly than all of our slides cover. So just wanted to communicate that with you, Jess. I'm not sure what the gray bar is. I apologize for that. There's a large gray bar kind of on the right of the presentation. So I apologize if that's blocking some of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about looking for warning signs. We know that as Jess talked about some of the vulnerabilities, and these are not, this is really difficult thing to talk about really quickly, because when we're looking at both sex and labor trafficking, they're very different. There's also, like Jessica mentioned, a deep complexity to this issue, but we do know some things that can clue us in. Unfortunately, though, they don't necessarily mean somebody's being trafficked. So one of the things that we do in our work in schools is help other kids understand what some of these, what we call red flags are, so that they are able to pay attention to that. And we talk about going from being a bystander to being an upstander. So some of the things that you might see with a kid who is getting trafficked, who is a youth, maybe even in high school, is you might see that student show up with new clothes or jewelry, a second phone, things that just don't compute with what you've noticed with that kid before. We sometimes see branding going on, where traffickers will actually brand their victim with some kind of a symbol. It could be a dollar sign, it could be a crown, it could be, we've even seen barcodes. There are all kinds of different ways that traffickers will brand a victim, looking for signs of abuse and distress, somebody that is being extra secretive or doesn't seem to be in control of their own ability, like for example with labor trafficking, of coming and going to work, or possibly living in the work establishment. So this is just a really broad sweep over what of the warning signs, some signs might be. When we talk about who are the traffickers, this is a really important slide, because what we want to say in all of this is it could really be anybody. So these are actual people who were arrested for trafficking. And as you see, they cross all ethnicities and race, and we see women in here. The first woman that I actually worked with as a mentor to her, she was trafficked by another woman. It started with panhandling. She was a really vulnerable young woman who was noticed by someone and picked up, and she started panhandling for the woman, and then it moved over time through coercion into being trafficked. So it's important to understand that traffickers come from all walks of life. let's talk a little bit about coercion. And again, we're going to have to wrap, Jess, so maybe you can speed through your last ones, and then we'll just talk real briefly about the on-ramps program. But this is an important one that we hope you'll take away some understanding from. And that is when we talk about this force, fraud, and coercion, what does that mean? And in the research study that we did, we found that there were the three most common types of coercion were chemical, psychological, and economic. So chemical coercion being when drugs and alcohol are used for control. We see drugs as a really common issue with people who are exploited, both understandably as a way to numb out to the incredible pain that they're going through, but it's also used by traffickers as a way to control. So you'll see drugs being used as a way to get somebody to do what the trafficker is wanting them to do. And we found that in 42% of the cases in our research study, they noted chemical coercion going on in their trafficking. Psychological conversion is the most common form. And that is why we talk a lot about how the movies and the media don't give it justice to what's really happening, because this is not violent physical force. This is psychological grooming. Jessica, you saw her talk about that a little bit in the Stolen episode. And if you jump into that whole series, you'll learn more about how this is the most common way that traffickers will control, is through this slow over time grooming and this ongoing psychological control. And then we see economic control too. So a lot of trafficking is happening out of desperation. We have victims who are being exploited, who are just trying to make ends meet, who are trying to keep food on the table for their kids, and they fall into this situation of exploitation where the economics around it, even though they're not taking the full profit of what's going on home with them, they're getting something out of it economically that becomes a point of coercion for the trafficker. Okay, and then so we talk about different types of traffickers. So again, in the media, we typically see this vicious, violent trafficker. What's most common with our youth right now in San Diego is what we call the boyfriend trafficker. That's someone who is posing as a boyfriend. And I have talked to young ladies who have been exploited by an older male, slightly older male, who they really sincerely believe loves them. It's from their viewpoint a love relationship, and it's part of the deal of that relationship. You see traffickers who are viewed more as a protector. They're taking care and protecting the person that's being exploited from violence. And you also see this, what we call the business partner entrepreneur trafficker, which is where it's really viewed as a partnership, and the person being exploited looks at it also as part of a partnership where they're working together towards a goal. But underneath this, peeled back from all of this, are these levels of exploitation and coercion that we have been talking about.
So this is just a quick graph. It's showing, at PLNU, we have been, we really believe in prevention with the No More program, where we're going into middle schools and high schools and educating the youth about sex trafficking and how to not fall into those situations. But we can't talk about sex trafficking without talking about the demand. The demand is really something that survivor advocates all across the nation are pushing for, that if we are not talking about the demand and the buyers of sex, then we're not really understanding the full scope of sex trafficking. So this just shows that 20% of men throughout their lifetime have bought sex, right? So it's really important to understand that if we don't talk about that demand, then we're not really understanding sex trafficking. So the beliefs and behaviors associated with sex buying, they're likely, the behaviors are, this person is likely to have had an affair. Pornography is a big part of the demand process. It's almost like an addiction when it comes to pornography, because the more they watch it, now it's like they want to experience it, so they go out and they buy sex from a person. Likely to have contracted an STI, the lack of impulse control, And this is a spectrum, right? So it starts gradually and then it becomes worse and it becomes more. The beliefs with this kind of behaviors is, well, guys are just being guys, right? Or the guys are just taking care of their needs. Or prostitution is a victimless crime. I can tell you that when I was being exploited, it was a painful situation. It was very cruel. It impacts all of us in different ways, but the mental health aspects of what this situation does to us is a lifelong process and something that we have to continuously work at to make sure that our mental health is intact. And I can tell you from working with many survivors from all ages, from youth to all the way to older age, that the mental health aspects of what happens to us is lifelong. So this is what can you do, right? So we want to be able to leave you with these numbers, the 800 numbers, the hotline. So if you suspect human trafficking, if you suspect, you don't have to prove it, you don't have to be involved, but you can pick up the phone and call 888-373-7888. And that's the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So we'll talk briefly. We only have a couple minutes probably, Kim, to talk about the on-ramps.
So just so you know, all of you who are watching, I know that Jamie's going to be sharing more information too, and it's just impossible to really provide all of the information, but I would like to recommend a website, which is churchesagainsttrafficking.com. Maybe you can pop it into the chat, Jess. And whether or not you're a person of faith doesn't matter for the toolkit that's on this site. We have developed a site that we developed out of the center, and we have developed a toolkit that's really about helping empower people to action. And it starts with education. One of our biggest pieces of advice is always just stop and listen and learn. We have so much to learn from people who have survived being trafficked, and they really have so many of the answers that we need to consider in our society for how to combat it. And there are lots of resources for how to learn more. So churchesagainsttrafficking.com has like a 12-step process where you can go in and educate and do a deep dive, including the HT 101 that we're doing tonight, but in a more expanded form. And we have it in English and Spanish. I did the English and Jessica did the Spanish. So just a resource for you know if this has piqued your interest and you want to dive a little bit deeper. But we're going to spend the last couple of minutes of our time talking about our collaborative that we are involved in. So what we haven't had time to share a lot about is that Jessica actually was our first Beauty for Ashes scholarship recipient. The Beauty for Ashes scholarship is the first of its kind in the nation scholarship for survivors of human trafficking, and it's at Loma Nazarene University. It's actually what led me into this work. As an alum of the university, I got to be a part of launching the scholarship. And that's where Jessica and I met when she was a student at Point Loma. And she graduated and went on to get her master's in social work at San Diego State and did her internship with the center. And during that process, she and I started to dream based on some of the experiences she had had as a student and some of the experiences I had had trying to help students navigate the environment of a university. And what we felt really strongly about was that there were some missing pieces and that we lowered the barrier of tuition through the Beauty for Ashes scholarship, but it wasn't enough. There were other barriers that our survivor scholars were facing that made it really difficult for them to thrive. And we decided, we put our stake in the ground around the idea that not on our watch was somebody going to get all the way to the point where they could come to a university to study, and then we would fail them by not supporting them well. And so out of that was born the On-Ramps Collaborative and the Flourish Academy. And I'll just talk for a couple of minutes about On-Ramps, and then we'll close with Jessica talking about Flourish Academy, which is a project she's leading. But the On-Ramps Collaborative is, the concept is when you think about somebody going on a trip in a car. That's the visual that we like to use, with the end goal. We have it here on this graph as being financial security, but we would also say now that we look at it really as holistic health. So we know that one of the major things that pulls people back into a life of exploitation is the lack of financial security. And we see that over and over again. And so with this idea, oh great, you can see the whole thing now. With this idea as our end result, the way we look at the On-Ramps Collaborative, which is a community project that we're leading, is that we look at the Beauty for Ashes Scholarship as one on-ramp towards that long-term financial security and that holistic health. But what we're dreaming of and working towards in San Diego is building a variety of on-ramps so that a survivor who wants to pursue either job training or education has many options, knowing and understanding that Point Loma isn't the right fit for everyone and their particular journey. And so on-ramps is an effort to work to open up these additional ways for survivors to get either job training or an education. So we're talking to the universities across town, to the community college district, to trade schools and vocational training opportunities, so that we can, as we work with survivors, and we have over 60 right now that we're actually in some form of conversation and work with around their future, as we do that they have the options that go beyond Point Loma. But important in that is preparing for the journey and then getting support along the road. So that is where holistic health comes in, and the Flourish Academy. We know, just like if you can have a car, but if you don't have a driver's license and haven't been taught how to drive, if you don't have good tires on your car and oil in the car and a tank full of gas and a motor that runs, it doesn't matter how many on-ramps there are. It doesn't matter how many opportunities you have. You're not going to be able to move forward. And so the holistic health work that we're doing, oops, I just lost the screen, but the holistic health work that we're doing is around this concept of supporting our survivor scholars as they move along this pathway, so that they have the support they need to thrive. And so Jess, why don't you tell them a little bit about the Flourish Academy, which is actually launching later this month, and again is another one of its kind types of programs here in San Diego.
It is amazing. I can tell you that I'm super excited about the Flourish Academy. It's launching the end of January, and we have partnered with Generate Hope. Actually, all of our efforts, the On-Ramps Collaborative, the Flourish Academy, the Beauty for Ashes Scholarship, the No More program, all of these programs are in collaboration with other organizations. We cannot do this on our own, and we recognize that. And so the Flourish Academy is partnering with Generate Hope and working with the ladies that have just exited the life of exploitation. So these are survivors who are less than a year out of the life of exploitation, and working with them from a health and wellness perspective. So we partnered up with the Health and Wellness the Health and Wellness Kinesiology Department at PLNU. And so we've developed a 12-week life skill program that is going to look at different parts of the healing process of survivors. And I'm super excited. We're ready to launch, and in our first cohort will be starting the end of January.
Are we taking questions, Bridget, now, a few questions now, and then handing it off to Jamie, or did we want to do questions at the end?
Well, we do have one question, and I believe it's for you ladies, since it was posted during your presentation. And it's from Peggy. I'm curious as to the reasoning that the military would bring in trafficking.
That is such a good question. Would you like to jump on that one, Jessica?
You can start, and I'll...
Okay, this is what it is. It's buyers. So, and that's the thing that we probably don't talk about. We know we don't talk about as much as we should. And it's the lifeblood of this exploitation is buyers. And so when you have a large military base in your town, you have more buyers. It's just the same reason why tourism and being a conference town brings in more buyers. So when you have an area or a city that is a magnet for the male population, you have a higher concentration of people who buy. So I know Jamie has some great input on military. So I want to make sure that she brings that up in her talk, because she has some super great insight on that.
Yeah, I can tell you from a personal, my personal experience when I was being trafficked in Tijuana, 90% of the buyers that I would see that would come in to buy sex from me when I was 12 years old were military. So it's not only here in San Diego, it's also across the border. And I'll leave the rest for Jamie, because she has some great information.
Okay, very good. And I think these other two questions that we have can be posed for Jamie as well. We'd like to thank you both so much for the powerful and illuminating presentation, and we're grateful. We've also posted in the chat the link to your website, Churches Against Trafficking, for everyone to go and take a look. So thank you both again. At this time, we'd like to introduce Jamie Johnson, who is the CEO of Sisters from the Streets. Welcome, Jamie, and thank you.
Thank you. It's actually Sisters of the Streets. So there is a Sisters on the Streets in LA, and so we get mixed up very often. So I just want to make sure. I have people trying to like donate to me, and they're like, "You run a homeless nonprofit," and I'm like, "No, I don't, but you could still donate." But you know, so there's a little bit of a mix up there. But thank you for having me. I'm going to, I guess I'll leave the questions towards the end and just answer all of them then. So let me share my screen. Thank you, Kim and Jessica, for the setting the foundation and like the facts. I think it actually partners well with the presentation I chose to bring in. It's going to be called The Beauty and the Struggle. So it goes with Beauty for Ashes quite well. I do like to always leave a glimmer of hope and ways that we can all be a part of the solution. And so with that, I do want to, this is more of a personal presentation on my personal experience to kind of piggyback and support the facts that you just heard from Kim and Jessica. So thank you again. Let me share my screen. Oh, maybe, I don't know. Sorry, I'm on an iPad and I never use an iPad, so I'm not really too sure. Okay, let me try this. I'm not quite sure how to do both. Okay, let me try it this way. Can you guys see anything?
We can't, Jamie, not yet.
Okay, that's not working from the iPad and I'm not sure why. So, hold on. I'm going to come in on my my computer because I know it will work on there, if that's okay.
That's okay. You can also email it if you want us to share it as well. It's up to you.
Okay, let me do that really quick. That would probably work better. Okay. I'm sending it over right now. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties.
That's okay. I think one of the things we have learned is having some grace in this new technology world we're all having to adapt in. So not a problem.
We're gonna get it together though. That's what we are going to do.
Almost
Okay.
every morning in presentations.
It's like great because it's a blessing to be able to try. It's like to be able to do it, but it's like also frustrating because you never know what's going to go wrong when. So I'm almost there, just trying to get the link.
Okay.
Ashley, can I just send it to you? I think you're the first email I have on here.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, it's coming your way. Just building anticipation, guys. That's what this is. Okay. It should be coming to you.
Okay.
So I will just start with the first couple slides are disclaimers, or is a disclaimer. So I'll start with that. There is, you know, obviously this is a heavy topic. And there are a lot of things that sometimes we expect to go in to learn, and oftentimes we leave, sometimes feeling triggered, unfortunately, because the symptom and the end result is the trafficking, but the vulnerabilities and the things that lead into that, often a lot of us share. We maybe don't share so publicly, but oftentimes a lot of us share these things in common with our childhood and just different things that led up to leading us all down the different paths that we went. So disclaimer, if anybody feels triggered, feels compelled to need to, like, you know, obviously step away from the computer, or has any questions on like support after anything in the presentation, please try to let me know. And we will try to work through that or connect you with somebody who can possibly help you work through that as well. So just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to disclaim that I do not claim to be an expert on human trafficking in general, because I am not. My experience is very specific to a little bit of CSEC, as they explained earlier, in my childhood, or my teen years, and then more specifically, urban domestic sex trafficking. So that is a very, very focused in area of human trafficking. So again, I'm not an expert on international trafficking or organ trafficking, or even labor trafficking. And so I do want to make that clear that this is through my personal experience and lived experience that I am taking from that and educating on this. And so don't take what I say and discredit anything that anybody else teaches or says, because all of our experiences are so unique and there's so much that goes into this area that we're still learning. I just want to make sure that that is clear. So thank you. Next slide, please. So this is kind of just a timeline. Obviously, my life has been a little more eventful than this, but this is a timeline kind of to really bring to perspective the vulnerabilities that led up to the chunk of my adulthood, and that ended up being my exploitation. So I'm not going to go through everything. If anybody wants these slides, I'll send them to you. But just a couple of key points. I'm 32, so I was born in 1988, good year. I was born in Whittier, California, to my mom and dad, who are both still in my life. So I did come from a home that they were separated, but still both active in my life. My mom did struggle with alcoholism and did have a lot of her own traumas. My dad was a first generation, well, actually, no, he was an immigrant from Japan, came here when he was about 7. And so he has that in his background. I was always a daddy's girl and always wanted to be with my dad, but that wasn't always possible. And so that, I think, in itself created some trauma very early on. Earlier trauma that existed was my mom was a chronic runner. And so when she didn't like things, we ran, we moved, we picked up or sometimes left everything and moved. So by the time I was about 5, we had probably lived in about 15 or 16 different places within Southern California. We finally planted roots in Oceanside, California, which I consider my hometown, and which is northern part of San Diego. And with that, how that came about is my mom just didn't come home one day, and she had met her boyfriend, who she basically said that we were moving in with, and this is what it is. My dad came and helped us move to our new home in Oceanside, and that is where a lot of trauma started. We lived in an extremely violent, domestic violent household. They were both alcoholics. He was a very violent alcoholic, and he was often very angry. He did sexually molest me at a young age, so about 6 or 7, from what I remember. I wasn't really too aware of what was happening, and I didn't really think that anyone would care or really believe me. I was a middle child, and I had middle child syndrome badly, and so I really was always trying to seek attention, whether that which started to lead into me lying because it got me attention. I would lie about silly things like, Jamie, did you eat that cookie? And I'd say no, and clearly I had cookie crumbs on me. But that gave me my mom's attention for that short period of time that I was getting in trouble, versus other things weren't working. I wasn't ever really great at anything like my brother or my sister. My sister was the pretty one, and my brother was the athlete. And so I kind of just fell in the middle and didn't really know where I fit in from a very early age. And so what that led me to is seeking attention anywhere. And as young girls, we often seek that attention in boys, especially if our dad and our relationship with our dad is not what we want it to be. I moved in between my mom and my dad for probably once a year. I would go back and forth, back and forth. My mom left with my brother and sister one day to Oregon to go back to Hector, who she had left, which was her boyfriend. I told her I didn't want to go, and she said, all right, well, you can stay here. And so there began my abandonment issues. And as you can see, all of these little things that we don't necessarily pay attention to throughout our lives because they're happening, all are things that build up these vulnerabilities to eventually lead me to when I was 14, getting into my very first relationship with a boy, being sexually active, not knowing that that can get you pregnant because I never had that talk with anybody. My boyfriend being my first relationship, being a domestic violence relationship, and me thinking that that was okay because that's all I was subject to when I was young. I never saw a healthy relationship in that way. So I thought as long as he gives you flowers or candy or gives you a kiss and apologizes, that it's okay. That's just what's normal. And so that was my normal. So I carried that into my adolescence. After I decided to break up with him, because I ended up getting pregnant, had my first abortion. My dad was the only person that knew, except for the rumors that were going around in school, which if any of us were in high school, we know that it is horrible to be the person that has rumors going around about them around the whole school, especially sexual rumors. And so that led me to shut down even more. I met a much older man when I was 15 in my apartment complex back with my mom at this point. And he was 27. Again, I had never had these conversations. I didn't know that this was wrong. I just thought, oh, cool. He thinks I'm a woman and I got me a real man because he's grown, not knowing that that was a predator at that time. And so that is where my exploitation began. I would go to his house on the weekends, come home kind of disoriented. I would have maybe 1 or 2 drinks, smoke a little bit of weed, but always pass out really quickly. And so I found out later through therapy, actually recently in my 30s, that what was happening was I was being roofied, and he was having a set of friends come to the house that we would be at, and rape me or do whatever they wanted while I was passed out or disoriented. And basically he was getting drugs and money in exchange for that. Now, I didn't know that that experience had happened. Him and I broke up for multiple reasons. That came out in trauma therapy and just talk therapy later down the line, as I said. Fast forward a little bit, 16, I ended up pregnant again with my 2 daughters. I have 3 kids, my daughters who are now 15 and almost 13, and my son who is 6. So at the time, their father, my daughter's father, he was 19, I was 16. I ended up getting pregnant, decided I didn't want to go through an abortion again. And that led me to become a high school dropout. I worked full time to take care of my family. He joined the military. And moving forward, by the time I was 19, we had our baby number 2 on the way. I was a military wife and everything was fine for about a year. And then that year came to a halt when he was struggling with identifying what his sexuality was. And so that made it uncomfortable for him. He ended up leaving us. And now I'm a single mom with 2 small children under the age of 5. And I am 20 with disconnection from my family and trying to just navigate and figure it out. Also accompanied by the feeling of like, I never got to just be a teenager. And so kind of having that urge to just go be able to do that, which led me to a club in San Diego, regular dance club, on my best friend at the time's birthday, which under the influence of alcohol, I met my first pimp, and there began my journey in urban domestic sex trafficking. And so I go through that to say, again, to identify the different vulnerabilities that were never addressed, talked about, or identified, that all led me to being 20 years old, being an adult, where again, we often look at the victims as in a different light. If they're under 18, which we do, there's a whole new set of trauma, and it is horrible what happens. But we also have to remember that those adults that are victimized and in vulnerable positions were once abused children, not necessarily CSEC, but were once children that had all of these vulnerabilities. And so that's the importance of this timeline, in my opinion. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jamie. I am trying to forward this for you.
No worries. The next slide is actually we can probably skip through because Jessica did a great job of going through the vulnerabilities, and that's all the next slide is going to be actually. So we can actually skip one more. If you do want a list of these vulnerabilities, I just hit me up after the presentation. I can definitely send you that. You're going to have to keep clicking the space bar because I was trying to be creative on this one. So grooming, I won't go too much into grooming. Oh, sorry, we can go back one. So these are amongst many ways that people can be groomed. And when we're saying grooming, there's a difference between grooming, breaking in, and then the actual exploitation. So grooming, I believe Jessica talked and touched a little bit on it, that grooming period of getting somebody prepared, getting somebody comfortable with the idea of using their body as an object. These grooming factors, I more so am talking about societal norms that fall into that grooming pattern. And so when we think about the culture we live in, rape culture, normalization of sex and objectification, porn culture, as I know was touched on, lack of options and choices in society, not because of anything other than the fact that look at our world and look at how many people are living in survival mode on a day-to-day basis. We have to pay attention to systemic racism and how that plays a part in the issue of lack of options and choices. And so not everybody's on an equal playing field. And so we oftentimes think that it's just easy for everybody to get through life the same way that we may because of what was given to us on our platform or our platter when we were born. And we have to understand that not everybody is given those options and same opportunities. And that is where some of us are able to come in the solution format. And instead of being judgmental of that, we are able to offer and open people's minds to the fact that there are other options, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so we have to offer those things. That's a little bit later down the presentation, but these are all just examples of how somebody can easily be groomed. You don't have to be in any special type of vulnerable position. You don't have to be in any super just drastic situation where you are just in survival. Granted, those add to the vulnerabilities, but as far as the grooming aspect goes, any of us on this Zoom call could fall into any of these categories for the simple fact that we all live in the same type of society that allows these things to thrive. Thank you. Next slide, please. So let's talk about how easy it is to get pulled into sex trafficking. I'm going to just give a couple of examples. You heard my example. I was, one, naive. The only type of possible recognition that I had towards prostitution, not sex trafficking, prostitution, was the movie Pretty Woman. That's the only movie it didn't register what was happening because they make it look very glamorized. By the end of the hour-and-a-half movie, she's swooped up and saved, and guy's handsome and got a lot of money and everything is all good. So it's very glamorized in how that is presented to us. And that was my only connection with this world, if anything. As far as pimps, walking the streets, the things that happen when you are in your exploitation, I had no idea that this world existed. And so when I presented my vulnerabilities on a platter, because when I did have those drinking days, I liked to talk and I liked to tell my business of what was going on. And that's what I did with the person who ended up turning me out, which turnout is a term, if anyone's not familiar, of just pretty much my first pimp, the person who introduced me to this lifestyle. Mind you, I want to make a side note, which this is a whole nother presentation that I do. My turnout pimp was not very far from the person that I was. His vulnerabilities fell very much into the same category. He was not an old man predator that was just out lurking. He was my age, actually a few months younger. And now looking back, I know and understand that he was doing what was glamorized to him. He was doing what was promoted to him, and what he was told makes you a real man within this realm was what he was doing. And it took him to understand his own traumas to be able to break out of that pattern and see that that was wrong and hold himself accountable. And so I just want to put that side note in, that in urban domestic sex trafficking specifically, it's not always this monster situation that sometimes is sensationalized to us. Does that happen? Are there horrible predators, people that are very sick in the head? Yes, there are. But when we get to the fact of solutions, we need to think deeper than victim, perpetrator, buyer, perpetrator, whatever the case is. We need to think deeper into that if we really want to shift how this issue is going to look within our communities. And so that's just my side soapbox on that issue. So how I got pulled in, I was vulnerable, and I shared that with this man, and he saw an opportunity and he took that. And when he presented that opportunity to me, I took it because I was in a vulnerable position. I didn't know what resources existed. Again, we're talking about lack of options or choices or understanding. If I don't know that WIC exists or government assistance exists or food stamps exist, I feel like I am alone. If I don't have family, I don't have resources, then I don't have anybody presenting these resources to me. And I have 2 kids at home that need to eat, and I need gas in my car, and I can't find a job. And then we think 2020, where we have a global pandemic, think of how many people are out of jobs that have never dealt with exploitation ever. Think of how difficult it is right now for us, and think of how easy it is for us to compromise our morale or compromise ourselves or the things around us to provide for our family. Most of us would probably do just about anything we needed to if our family, children, loved one, mother, father, whoever it is that is closest to your heart was suffering, and we had the capability to take care of that. We probably would think about compromising. We might not take the action to do it, but we would think about it. When you're hungry, when you throw addiction into these things and you have a habit to feed and you don't have resources to get clean and sober or have the skill set to be able to do that, And there's this vicious cycle of needing to feed that habit so you're not sick every day. And understanding that there are things that need to be in place for us to help each other and take care of each other. It's very easy to fall into a space where, like I said, we compromise our morals and we compromise what we would do to our bodies, let be done to our bodies, let be done to our minds, because we're in a state of survival. And so a huge part of the solution that I like to talk about, and I will talk a little bit more at the end of the presentation, is focusing on that opportunity to create a community that is taking care of each other once again, versus, well, if we ever were there, but getting our community to a space where we're taking care of each other versus thinking that, oh, that person's not my problem, and only thinking about our own lives and our own circle of people, and really stepping out to create a safe community for people to have options and opportunities. It is super easy for somebody's morals to be compromised in a situation of survival, and that is basically the foundation of how easy it is to get pulled into sex trafficking. If a vulnerability exists in your life, which every human has a vulnerability, even if that vulnerability is just the simple fact that you want to feel love and you want to feel acceptance, it is that simple. You are vulnerable to domestic sex trafficking. And so I encourage us all to not look at those that have survived or are currently going through sexual exploitation as somebody that just has all of these extra problems, or just must have come up in this type of neighborhood or this type of family structure, because that's not always the case. As a grown adult and 35 years old, if I fall into a space where my marriage falls apart and I don't feel worthy because all of my worth came out of that marriage, I would then be vulnerable, and a pimp, a trafficker, a buyer could easily come along and entice me in that moment of vulnerability to compromise myself for something I normally wouldn't do, just not for the money, for the simple fact I want to feel loved and valued, and the words that they're saying to me sound good in that moment. And so I hope that makes sense to everybody, and we can kind of start putting ourselves in a space of not looking at people as those people, but looking at people as mirrors to ourselves and our own lives. So thank you. Next slide, please. And then let's talk about the resources available to get out and the realities of staying out, because this is important. If you Google sex trafficking resources, you're going to get a whole slew of things, right? You're going to get a lot of different numbers. You're going to get a lot of different websites. If you actually take the time to go through these numbers and websites, you're going to see that a lot of them are either no longer in business, full, don't have the capacity to be able to provide the resources because there's no funding, don't actually offer the services that are being advertised. And this is not all, this is just majority. Unfortunately, sex trafficking, human trafficking is a sexy issue right now, has been for the past few years. And there is a lot of focus on people wanting with good intent to help, but not understanding the dynamics that really come along with helping. And oftentimes people think that the hardest part is to extract somebody from their situation. The hardest part is to get someone out, get them away from their pimp, get them away from the buyer, and everything is going to be all good from there. That's the easiest part. The easiest part is extracting somebody. The difficult part is setting up a success plan and the support system around that individual. One, to understand that most likely they're going to go back at some point. They're going to disappoint you at some point because you have an expectation on them. Keeping that open door policy with them is very difficult. That is the hard part. The hard part for that individual is finding the will to want to stay away from what they have become so accustomed to and so normal. So you might be in from your perspective as an individual, you might be looking into somebody's situation and being able to see from an outside perspective, that is a horrible situation. Why don't they see that? But if that's all I've known for so long, and that is where my comfort is, And that is and that person is feeding me, taking care of me. That situation is feeding me, taking care of me, giving me a roof over my head, feeding my habit, making sure my kids are fed, buying me clothes, transporting me where I need to go. If that is my sole source of survival, and that is what I have come to know as normal, to me on the inside, it doesn't seem that bad because I'm not able to see it from your perspective. And so it's very easy for us to look in and judge and say what somebody should do. But the reality is that we out here in the community are not always a trauma-informed community to be able to embrace that person and all the things that come along with the trauma that they've endured. And oftentimes we are a big part of pushing people back into where they are comfortable and where they feel normal, quote, whatever that means, quote unquote normal. And what I mean by that is that our stigmas, our biases, our prejudice against even just certain words, the word prostitute, the word whore, the word hoe, the word pimp, the word trick, the word sex buyer, all of these words have a negative connotation on them that are extremely out in the open, and we openly talk, make jokes about them. And so people that have actually lived these things, who wants to be the person that goes into a room and feels like jokes are being made about a prostitute, knowing that you were a prostitute, just got out of that situation, and hearing how your fellow colleagues at your new job or in the community or at home are joking and talking about something that you experienced firsthand. I'm going to be super uncomfortable in that situation, and I'm going to want to go back to where I'm accepted, where I feel love, even if it's a false sense of love. And I'm going to go back to the person that is giving me that, whether you view them as a predator, an abuser, or whatever the case is. To me, that was the person that accepted me. That was the person that loved me for where I was at. That's the person who didn't judge me. And so if we as a community are not ready to set up to embrace these people that fall under these stigmas that we have on these words and these experiences, we cannot tell anybody that they should be shifting away from those experiences. We have to do our part in being a part of that community that embraces folks and is able to be trauma informed about it. And then we can address the fact of the resources not being available, because if we can change our internal of how we approach people, the way we give services changes, and then the availability for services will change along with that. But that first step is understanding ourselves and our own biases and how we are being a part of pushing people back into their exploitive situations or trauma-filled situations. Next slide, please. And so this is just an overview, kind of what I already talked about, that first step. Oftentimes we think the first step is housing, transportation, all of these things that service providers are able to provide or trying to provide, and those are very crucial and important. But if I don't know how to maintain those things as a survivor of sex trafficking, as a survivor of abuse, as a survivor of the foster system, whatever the case is, if I don't know how to navigate through those things, because I've never had to take care of a house, I've never had to open a bank account, I've never had to fold my towels, I've never had to cook on a stove, I've never had to fix anything in a house. I've never had to do any of those things, because if you think about it, especially if I've been in a hotel or in a house, isolated, or I've been on the streets, whatever the case is, you don't have those responsibilities. At a hotel, somebody folds your towels for you. At a hotel, somebody makes your bed for you. So if I've been living that way for years and years and years, I don't have those skills. Granted, I either forgot them or I was never taught them in the first place. And so there's a step before providing all of those things. And that's all I was speaking about. The person has to first and foremost make that choice. You cannot force that choice. You cannot encourage that choice through anything except empowerment for that person to decide that this is enough. I want change. And understanding that in that moment, they may be very genuine with the fact that they want to make that choice. But the time frame and the window of opportunity sometimes can be very small. I might feel like I want to leave and I hate him or I hate her and I'm out of here. I don't ever want to do this again. and tomorrow may be a different story. And so it's very important for us to take advantage of that small window of opportunity when somebody does want to make that transformation in their life. So that person, an individual, has to make that choice first and foremost for themselves. Then they have to be willing to take those steps. They have to be willing to reach out and do the work and find the resources and not depend on somebody else to do it. Because if you're not there to hold their hand, how would they navigate through these resources? Then they have to be willing to utilize the support around them, know the options that they have. And if their options are not there, they have to transfer their skills from hustling and surviving into creating options for themselves. And then from there, we can choose to change habits, change routines, change the environment we're in, change our mindsets. And then once we can identify how to do those things, then we can successfully go into housing and transportation, life skills, educational support, job skills, getting involved with things like the program Jessica is heading, things like Point Loma Nazarene has to offer. Then, because I'm in a space where I've made that choice and I'm not just trying to hang on by the tip of a string, now I can successfully navigate these resources, which then I lessen my chance for recidivism, because if I go in and I fail at one of these programs, or I go to school and I fail because I don't have these first steps taken care of, then I feel like a failure and I never want to try again. And so you see, there's a pattern that has to happen, and we have to set each other up for success. And we have to allow ourselves to be set up for success as well with these resources. Next slide, please. And so I just want to share some hope. I know it's a lot of information, trying to get through it quickly. Me personally, these are all the things that I've been able to accomplish over the past 5 years. I stopped being involved with my last pimp in 2013, but for about a year and a half, I was for about a year, I was self-exploiting because I didn't really know all those things we just talked about. I didn't really know how to transition away from that. And so I exploited myself for a really long time. Then I, by the grace of God, met my son's biological father and got pregnant with him, and knew that I had to be better for my son. My son is my saving grace. Definitely, he saved my life, and I'm thankful for him, all of my kids. But my son gave me a second chance to be a mother. Unfortunately, I had a lot of lost time with my daughters. And so my son was that opportunity that God told me, like, hey, I'm giving you a second chance. And so with that, it hasn't been a walk in the park by any means, but I have been able to take care of my legal issues. I walked around with warrants in 7 different counties, all up and down California, all for prostitution, which is a misdemeanor, but might as well be treated as a felony because of the way that the stigma on it and the way that people treat you when they see it pop up on your record. And so, granted, they were misdemeanors. I should have been off probation 3 years after the original charge, but because of my circumstances, pimps not wanting me to go to court, or not wanting to pay the fines, or me just not wanting to go to jail and have to hold myself accountable, those legal issues lasted about 10 years. With the help of an amazing organization, Free to Thrive, which is based out of San Diego, headed by Jamie Quint. They give pro bono legal services to survivors of human trafficking. They have helped me with domestic violence orders. They have helped me with things with my children. They have helped me get all of my legal issues handled, which now I'm in the process. I've been warrant free for 2 years, and 2 years, been warrant free, been off paperwork. And I am now in the process of getting a full vacatur in every county so that these issues eventually will go to the Department of Justice, and it'd be like they will never happen. It takes a little bit of time, but I am in that process. This is the first time I've been financially independent. Since my exploitation, the last couple of years, I've been financially independent. There have been some amazing resources that have come alongside me and been able to support me in my times of struggle. I'm very open with my struggle in recovery. I have had multiple relapses. I have had multiple spouts of really dark days and depression. And there's been a huge support team to be able to come alongside me and help me through those things, and still leave me standing and give me the ability to still be standing today stronger than I ever have felt throughout my life. And I have started an amazing organization called Sisters of the Streets, and I am so proud of it. That's my baby. I just love the opportunities God has given me with that to help inspire other lived experience experts to be able to find their empowerment within themselves and know that we are not our stories, that our stories are an experience, and we can be so much more, and we are so much more. I'm a very active parent with all of my children. I went from having no custody of my daughters to having shared custody with my mother. I have full custody and rights to my son. I am with him every day, getting to experience the age that I unfortunately left my daughters, and getting to re-experience that and learn how to love unconditionally outside of my outside of anything else, and really understand what that means, and understanding that being a parent, using my experiences with these types of traumas, is the opportunity to break these curses on my children's lives and allow it to stop here, and know that I can use my experience not only to help the community, not only to help others, but most importantly, help my children to be able to be successful in not only life financially, and in the materialistic ways, but in the ways of breaking trauma and addressing trauma. And that is powerful to me, and I am forever grateful. I put sobriety, but my word for this year is recovery. I would like full transparency. I would like 2021 to be the first year that I can say I was clean and sober all year, confidently, without feeling like I was just hanging on by a thread. And so I feel that God has put this year in my path to be just that. And I hope that that is going to inspire others. My journey and healing is continual, and I'm forever grateful for it, because it is a learning process consistently and constantly. And being open with my healing has allowed some amazing people to come alongside me to tell me that I inspire them to face their healing. And that is outside of being a generational curse breaker for my children and being able to be blessed my children. That is about the next best thing in life that I could ask for. And just life. I put myself in positions where I should not have been alive. And when I didn't even know God was there taking care of me, he was. And this is not to be preachy, but for me, it was God that protected me when I didn't know I need protecting. When I thought that I was me against the world and I could do it all, he had his hand on me. And there were many situations that a buyer could have killed me easily. A pimp could have killed me easily. There are many situations that I tried to take my own life, and God had other plans. And so I am thankful first and foremost for God and for life in itself. And that is the beauty in the struggle, in my struggle. And next slide, please. So with that, I want to leave everybody with opportunity for action items within your own lives, and just keep these in mind. Become educated, preferably by those with lived experience. That is not to wipe out or discredit the work that amazing advocates do, but there are just some things that you can't learn from a book, and lived experience is necessary for the solutions. We cannot do anything. There's nothing that should be being done for us without us. There is nothing that should be happening within the anti-trafficking movement that is not survivor-led, survivor-informed, or survivor-educated, because that lived experience is going to speak to so many solutions that you can't learn from a third-party book. And we need advocates, we need allies, but we need allies and advocates that are willing to learn and stay teachable. And we as lived experience experts have to stay teachable as well. And when I say lived experience experts, I meant to explain this at the beginning. That is just a term that I'm more comfortable with than survivor or survivor leader. Everybody is individual. That's what I prefer on a professional level, because my lived experience is not just trafficking. I have lived experience in many different areas. And so when you hear me say that, all I'm referring to is survivorship, and applying that in a professional manner. You can also get involved, volunteer with reputable organizations. If you don't know where those are, again, go to survivor leaders, lived experience experts, and ask, say, hey, like, who do you vouch for? Who can I get involved with? I have a full list throughout different organizations throughout the country. If anybody would like to get involved in different areas, there's a lot of amazing organizations in San Diego. Volunteer, get out, put a drive together, donate, whatever you can do. You can also create safe spaces within your community. This doesn't have to do anything with trafficking specifically, but you can hold monthly coffee meetings. I don't know if you can now, but hold Zoom meetings to create safe space. Have a book club where people know and have the opportunity to come forward and have a healing space. Anything to create those safe spaces within the community, especially amongst men, because guys, men need safe spaces to come forward and be able to recreate what is healthy in men. Because if the demand is the issue, a lot of traumas, vulnerabilities, and normalizations in the community and society are helping demand thrive. And so we have to give men a space to heal so that they can then detour from becoming future buyers and help other people detour from becoming those buyers and fix their mentalities about buying and objectifying women. Have these uncomfortable conversations with your friends, families, and kids. Don't be the person that sits at the family dinner and jokes about things that you shouldn't be joking about. Stand up and have these conversations, because that's how we change the norms and change these things amongst our family structure. It all starts at home. Have these uncomfortable conversations with your kids. It's never too early. You don't have to sit and talk to your 5-year-old about human trafficking, but you can sit and talk to your 5-year-old about saying no, about boundaries, about things that are right and wrong, about being a good person, about treating friends with respect, about sharing. All of these things can be had, these conversations can be had with your children very early, and these all lead into limiting those vulnerabilities that we discussed at the beginning of this presentation that I had in my childhood. Be an activist within your own circles, as I said, changing perspectives, stigmas, inappropriate jokes, comments, attending bachelorette parties at strip clubs, knowing that that leads directly into exploitation. Being the person that has the voice and the power and the ability and the resilience to stand up and change those norms within your own circles first, because that's going to ripple out into the community, which then ripples out into the state and into the country and into the world. And so doing your part is changing more than you could ever imagine. Hold community events if that's your thing. Obviously, again, right now, maybe not. Figuring out how to turn that into a virtual opportunity, as Junior League of San Diego did, is amazing as well, and so easy and tangible, and also able to reach so many more people than you might have been able to before. And last but not least, donate. If you can't donate monetarily, donate your time, your services, your skills. Sisters of the Streets has an opportunity. We are this year starting cohorts for survivors. If you have a skill that you would like to pass on in makeup, if you know how to take care of skin, if you know how to use Microsoft 365, if you know how to use PowerPoint and you're great at that, you can contact us and you can sign up to teach a monthly or a once a month class to a class of survivors who then can take that skill, and now you're being a huge part of the solution, because now they are sparked, they are encouraged, they are giving that opportunity to themselves to know, like, oh, now I have this skill, so that's one step closer to not having to go backwards to my exploitation. And so you are being a part of transforming their lives. You don't have to be an expert on human trafficking to do so. You be an expert on what it is you're an expert on, and you share that gift with other people and volunteer your time. And if you can donate money, we always need money. All the organizations need money. So if you are a grant writer, if you are good at networking and building community and holding fundraisers, get involved that way. And so these are just my suggestions. There's tons more things that can happen that you can get yourself involved with. And if you need more suggestions, please, again, email me or contact me on my website, which is the next slide, is our information, sistersofthestreets.org. Everything that we're doing can be found on there. If you have any questions, there's a little chat box that pops up that's pretty cool. You can just hit me up on there. It comes right to my phone. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. And other than that, if there's any questions, that's all I have for tonight.
Well, Jamie, thank you for your incredibly powerful presentation. We are also inspired by you and your story. And it's brave and just and generous of you to share all of that with us. Thank you. Thank you for teaching us how to be trauma informed, how to be survivor informed. And I'm sure that all of us want to learn more from you. So thank you so much. There are some questions, and there are 3 questions that we haven't yet answered. One of them is, there are so many massage parlors. This is from an anonymous attendee. So many massage parlors where he or she lives. Why aren't they closed?
So massage parlors are tricky, right? Because they are presented as massage parlors. It is very difficult for law enforcement to prove that trafficking is going on. There's also this very fine line. I actually be doing a presentation later this month with IPATH and somebody, a lawyer out of Indiana, on the intersex of sex trafficking and labor trafficking in the form of strip clubs, massage parlors, and agencies or brothels. And so we are stepping into that area, but it's a touchy area because the spas that I worked at on a personal level, I was always the minority there. So it was always women that were from Asian descent and barely spoke any English, were terrified out their minds because they were brought over here with some type of intent, some type of promise. Then they're put in these parlors that they have no idea what's going on. They're being sold for sex and they are terrified. The last thing they want to do is talk to a police officer and tell that officer that what's going on. On top of that, there's no translation. If I don't understand, I'm in a new country, I'm being objectified, I'm being abused, food's being held from me, all my money's being taken from me. And then a police officer storms into my only place of residence, the only place I know where to sleep, and expects me to talk to him or her and come forward with this information. So there's no testimony. Unfortunately, human trafficking is fully based, prosecution is almost, I don't know the percentage, but highly based off of testimony. And that is why, as the DA had said in the video that Jessica and Kim shared, it's so difficult to prosecute these cases because intimidation is real, gang involvement is real, cartel is real, these things are real. And you might not care about your life, but if somebody is threatening your family, somebody is threatening your outside sources, your children, you're not going to come forward in the hopes that your perpetrator will be locked up. And so in my opinion, the massage parlors, it's hard to differentiate what is an actual legitimate massage parlor and what is not legitimate. And so because we don't know so much about human trafficking, we're still trying to understand domestic sex trafficking as a whole, let alone try to dig into the complexity of what a massage parlor is doing and what's happening there.
Yeah, and that, I think, just to add to that, Jamie, that's such a great point. We really don't have anyone that with significant expertise around illicit massage and helping treat victims of illicit massage in San Diego. There are other communities around the nation that are further ahead than us, but I will tell you that there's a growing commitment to it. I've been working with Jamie Beck, that Jamie mentioned, from Free to Thrive, and we had the opportunity to do some advocacy about a year ago with the San Diego City Council, who passed a new regulation that helps them weed out illicit massage, but it's just a tool. It's not the answer. It's really complex. And what we know is that like Jamie said, it's about 0% chance that somebody's going to self-identify to a law enforcement officer in a sting. And then we don't really have appropriate or adequate support for them. And so it's, but I really believe that our community needs to step up in this area. We have over 250 identified illicit massage businesses in San Diego. So it's a huge issue, and I don't know, they shouldn't be open. You can call, there are reporting functions right now for COVID, but it's super complex. So advocacy is a big part of that. I mean, I really saw that this last year, where a group of advocates came together to help support this move with the city council to change the regulations, which again, it's just a tool, but that's what we're trying to build is a little more community will right now around illicit massage, because we've been turning our head from it primarily.
Well, thank you. So another question is from Lori. She's very inspired, and she's asking, what can I do to get involved? I want to make a difference, exclamation point.
Well, so as far, I mean, my suggestions, if you would like suggestions outside of just more in depth than the slide that I presented, I'm more than willing to just get with you on a personal level if you'd like to email, or you can call me. There's so many ways. And I think for me, I think the most impactful way is we all got a lane, right? Like we all have a lane. And I think the problem is that sometimes we try so hard to step into other people's lanes, and then we feel like we're failing, or we actually are re-traumatizing or re-exploiting people because it's not our avenue. So my biggest suggestion overall is to stay in your lane. And that's not to be rude. That's just stay in your lane, because we all have a niche and we all have something important to offer the next person. And so I think the biggest way to start getting involved is to figure out, what am I good at? Where is my heart? How do I love other people outside of just myself and what I think is love? How do I learn to love other people in the way that they feel love? Start there, identify what you're great at, and then learn how the best way to share that with other people is, because as I said, you don't know what your greatness is going to spark in somebody else. And something so significant with those that have been exploited or abused from such an early age is a lot of times we didn't get an opportunity to figure out what we like. And so offering that space to help somebody and just come alongside somebody and be like, what do you like? What is your favorite color? What is your favorite food? Like, do you like your hair color? You want me to take you to go change it? Like, what kind of clothes do you like? Simple things that we overlook so much can spark that joy back into somebody, then giving them a reason to want to move on in their life, want to move forward. And that spark helps them get further away from allowing and desiring that trauma to run their life. Because now I feel more valuable than what was being done to me or what I was allowing to be done to me. And so I think that humanity aspect is so overlooked and so important. And so that would be my suggestion.
Great
I
information.
love how you said that, Jamie, about humanity, right? Understanding other people and meeting them where they're at. I think one of the challenges that I've seen or I've experienced is, so another suggestion would be to understand your own biases, to not come into a situation or into a relationship with a survivor trying to save them or trying to change them in any way. I think what Jamie was saying about meeting where they're at and just working there. So understand your own biases, and even just before, as well as getting educated on HT, just like what you're doing here today.
And just to piggyback off that, let me just be all the way real with you guys. Like, people that have been in the game, like, we have a keen sense of like people being phony and fake. So you can think that you're putting on a poker face, but our literal survival was to be able to navigate people by their face, by how their body movement, to protect ourselves. In order to live through this, you literally have to learn how to read people. And so being authentic is so important. Like, if you don't know something, it's okay, but don't pretend you know it, because that's going to be offensive and also going to slice the opportunity and stop the opportunity from that authentic rapport that you can build, because that rapport is not you can't get anywhere solution wise with anybody if you don't have that rapport. And so just a heads up, you might be thinking that you're fooling people, but majority of the time it's not happening. And it's just really putting a bigger blockage up in that person to create relational intimacy with others and get them out of that isolation.
Thank you. And these last three questions are for all three of you. Christiane is asking, do you think the glamorization of being a pimp is getting worse or better?
That's a tricky one, I think, because I think the sensationalism of what a pimp is has gotten to the point where people are like, oh, like, we don't like pimps. But I think it depends on the generation that you're talking about. I think it depends on if you're talking about the younger generation, then yes, it's way over glamorized, and it's still very cool to be that. And it's still very much glamorized to the fact of like, why wouldn't I do this? Why would I go to school if I can have my girlfriend go make $1,000 a night for me? That's glamorized to them. But if we're talking about, oh my gosh, I'm going to say older generations, and I'm a part of that. So I'm just like, oh, but older generations, we have come to know that like the dynamics behind what pimping is and what that does to other people. And so we're turned off by it. So I think that that's a loaded question, because it really depends who your audience is and who you're talking to.
I'm part of that older generation, so I have two teenagers that I can.
I know. I'm like, oh no. I keep trying to tell them I'm the cool mom, and they're like, if you say you're the cool mom, you're not the cool mom. And I'm like,
no. I can see how, so, you know, just everything that they're being, that they're seeing, the videos, the games, the music, everything. Being of the older generation, think it's just changing. I don't think it's getting better or worse. It's evolving. It looks different, but it's there. It just looks different. Yeah.
True.
Okay.
I do know that more people are recognizing legally wise, it's not worth it. I do think that, because people are seeing their friends, people are seeing people they know get locked up for like murder years for these crimes, and seeing how easily entrapped you can become by getting these charges, and seeing how the focus is to make sure that this is prosecuted. And so I do think that is, I guess in that aspect, it is getting better, quote unquote. I do see that happening, at least amongst the people that I know that are still involved in that lifestyle.
That's good news. Next question, anonymous questioner, sorry. Where do you suggest donating toiletries to any group? Who needs them more?
There are a lot of organizations in town who provide direct service to people getting out of a life of exploitation. And I think figuring out what they really need is important, because I think they experience getting a lot of things they don't necessarily need, but they do have those ongoing needs. And I know that you can even step in on a small basis. I love to give the example of, there's one church that just buys the paper products for one home in town. But that program knows that they can depend on that resource every month. So I think there's a website called CaliforniaAgainstSlavery.org, and it is San Diego based. And we have developed a website, a resource on that website that helps you look up all the organizations in actually any part of California. But you can go on that website to find out who's doing direct service in San Diego. And it's a great way then to make connections, to find out if you have a particular interest in supporting in a certain way, then you can find contact information for those organizations through CaliforniaAgainstSlavery.org.
Thank you, ladies. And I will put that website in the chat. Our final question is from Romina. It's a two-part question. Do you offer shelter for victims? And what do you do when you receive a victim?
So Sisters of the Street specifically, we, as of now, we're only referral. So we do partner and collaborate with organizations that do offer housing. I always try to first and foremost send the women or men that seek assistance from me to survivor-led programs. If they're not available, then I do have some great programs that I vouch for in San Diego, specifically Alabaster Jar, with the Grace House being one of them. They are an amazing program that also takes toiletry items, so they're great to get involved with. Generate Hope, who because their program is so great, is constantly full, which is a good thing because that means that the women are finishing the program. So if it's a 2-year program, if they don't have open beds, often that means that the women are staying at the program, which is a great thing. And so I do referral process. A part of the services that we provide are emergency and gap funding. And so what that entails a lot of times, especially with COVID, you guys would not believe the influx of requests that I'm sure all of us have been getting. We provide Airbnbs for as long as we can to those trying to transition to figure out where do we place people, where's open. And then on top of that, unfortunately, right now, I've had multiple situations where a program is like, yeah, she can come here, he can come here, but you have to provide quarantine for 2 weeks before they come. And if we have ever stayed in a hotel, we know that the minimum is like $60 a night. And so for an unfunded grassroots organization like myself, that gets really expensive and it becomes difficult. And so we don't directly provide shelter. That is in the 5-year plan. We're hoping. So if anyone has a house that you'd like to give me, hey, great. I'm open. It's tax deductible, but we definitely want to open a all-inclusive type of shelter where we're doing those things that I was talking about, like teaching people that those domestic, like root things that sometimes we forget how to do. That's in the 5-year plan. So until then, we offer the referral services. And when we get a referral, or we take a lot of self-referrals or word of mouth, a lot of the women and men that come to me are through social media outreach or word of mouth from other survivors that have gotten help from my program. And basically what happens is they fill out an intake form so that I can be better informed on what their needs is, because it's not about what I think somebody needs in their healing. It's about what is best for that person. And so if I know their needs, and then I can navigate through my resources to figure out where do we go from here. And so making that initial relationship is important. And then from there, adapting to the individual's needs versus trying to tell that individual that they have to adapt to what I want for them.
There's also a new project called the SoCal Safe Shelter Collaborative, which is just launched. It's actually a great way for people to plug in and get involved on a small level. And what it is, it's a coordination between 22 organizations and agencies that find that help both survivors of human trafficking, but also domestic violence and sexual assault. And so one of the functions of the collaborative is actually to provide shelter in emergency situations. And so you can actually go on and become a donor, where if they have somebody who, like Jamie was mentioning, one of the organizations that will take somebody in, but they need shelter immediately, you can donate just to cover the cost of that night for the hotel. And it goes directly to solve that immediate issue. So it's a new kind of innovative thing that we've launched here in San Diego that, again, on the California Against Slavery.org site, there's information about.
Well, thank you to our speakers for introducing us to this incredibly broad, vast world of trafficking. So many of us who haven't delved into this had any idea. So we're incredibly grateful for opening our eyes. So thank you very much. And I pass it on to Ashley.
Great, thank you, Bridget. And I first want to thank Jamie and Jessica for allowing us to hear a piece of your journey. And please know that we appreciate the vulnerability that it takes to be able to do that, and having the honor to be able to hear that. We greatly appreciate. Thank you, of course, for sharing with us so much information, and there's so much more to learn and understand so that we can all be an active part of the solution. And I'm always happy to hear about whole community approaches and collaborations with various organizations, because it does take a community to solve complex issues. And so to hear that you all are working so closely with so many organizations, many of whom are also going to be panelists in the upcoming presentations this month, is really heartening, and certainly look forward to hearing from those organizations as well. For all of us, just to remember that this is only the beginning. A presentation certainly can't be the end to our learning, and being open to the conversations and sharing as much as we can to as many people as will listen is really important. We continue to look forward to the collaboration with both of your organizations, and certainly look forward to how we can engage in future opportunities, developing the relationship, and seeing where that can go, to continue supporting survivor efforts and human trafficking awareness in San Diego. And then lastly, just encourage all of you, as Jamie said, to lean into the uncomfortable conversations and be present in those. Will allow us to continue to be an ally and advocate in this work.
Can I give a shameless plug really quick?
Yes.
So we just got an email from Monica Dean. So the documentary that you saw that Jessica and Kim shared, that is a 7-part series docuseries, but it's been turned into, with a lot of hard work, into a feature-length documentary. I was trying to think of the right word. And so that's actually airing nationally on Saturday.
Yeah.
Saturday at 1 o'clock. No, sorry, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard, so California time. And if you just like go on to Monica Dean's, like if you just search her on Instagram or Facebook, you can see the actual ad on there. So it's a really, they did a great job. She worked really, really hard on that. There's a lot of different survivor voices, a lot of different advocate voices, ally voices. So please check that series out. If you don't want to watch the documentary length one, then you can go on to NBC7.com, I believe, and there's a stolen part on there, and you can literally watch all the docuseries. So I just wanted to plug that real quick before I forget.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate that. And we can also share that out as well after the presentation. In closing, our second of 4 parts to the education awareness around human trafficking is next Thursday at 6 p.m. Encourage you all to share among your networks. Registration will be through Eventbrite. And Junior League of San Diego is posting in various social media formats as well. And then January 11th is Human Trafficking Awareness Day. Junior League is participating in the Blue campaign, and I just posted the link in our chat, and it's a fairly simple campaign in that you wear the color blue, which is representative of human trafficking awareness, and post to social media as you are comfortable to let others know what human trafficking is and how they can be a part of the solution. With that, I will close us out and again say thank you so much to our panelists for taking so much time this evening, and for attendees as well for being part of the conversation. And we look forward to future conversations and being a part of the solution with all of you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Kim.
Great to see you.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.